What is your best met the high school bully as an adult story? I own my own gym and have for a few years now. I received a message one day from a familiar looking name on the business Facebook page from a woman asking to come try us out. We set it up. She comes in for an introduction. She's a very large and out of shape woman at this point. After about 5 minutes of working with her, it hits me that this lady used to be about half her current size and was an absolute bee in her heyday. I decided not to bring it up to her as she appeared to be struggling in life and came to us in a time of need, and I took it, as I do with all of my clients, as a cry for help. Not to mention, I'm a grown man now and that seemed pretty silly and insignificant in life today. Months later during one of the classes, I noticed her struggling real hard, so I go over to offer some encouragement. As I lean down to say something to her, I notice she's crying faintly to herself. She looks up at me and quietly says sorry for how nasty I was to you years ago and thank you for doing this for me. Turns out an old mutual friend told her about my place and she recognized me as the owner and came to me on purpose. No, not a story of revenge or retribution, but she reached out to someone she was terrible to and today, she's repurposed, and I find it to be quite inspiring. Not quite the same, but about 10 years ago I caught my dad screaming at the TV. This freaking butthole got his own show. He was such a piece of crap when we were kids. He would beat you up for your lunch money, push you for no good reason, take your toys, and based on the way he acts now it does not seem like he grew up much. He was talking about Paul Tuchel Sr. from American Choppers. I grew up with the golds on hardcore porn, and they are snobby people, so I had a similar thought process when I saw the show. We met at a bar where a large number of our high school class happened to be. He described me as his arch enemy. I realized I hadn't even thought about him in 10 years. She got the whole middle school through junior high to call me gay. I was not gay. She is. She came out of the closet right after high school. AWW. She secretly liked you and hoped you were a lesbian too. I was a jerk in high school. Then I went through the karma mandated fat phase. Made a guy's day when he saw me at work. I went from pretty dang fine in high school to man the harpoons. I am also nicer. He came in and said wow, fanciful unicorn, and I said yep. Does this make it feel better, and spread out my arms. He responded heck yes. You were a B. I said sorry. I was pretty immature, and then we talked like normal adults. Moved to a new school in 7th grade and was doing fine, making friends, good grades. Then somehow ran afoul of this bigger kid. He'd been held back a few times. Typical bully, pushed little kids into lockers, loved to torment girls, and ran with a pack of acolytes who adored and aped him. In Texas at the time, if a kid didn't like you, he called you out, challenged you to a fight after school. Well, Zed calls me out one day because I was a F from New York. Clueless me, moved there from said NY, where people are civilized. I said, sure, okay. A few days later, in front of his acolyte and a small group of my friends, he proceeds to beat the crap out of me. It was 7th grade, so the damage wasn't excessive, mostly to my pride. I spent the rest of middle school known as one of the guys Zed beat the crap out of. Fast forward about 7 years, home from college and going to the grocery store for mom. Who should I see bagging my goodies but Zed? Taking a look at him, I see a horrible scar running from the top of his head down around the back of his skull and neck and under his shirt. His face lights up when he sees me, and he says, in slightly slurred speech, hey, didn't we go to school together? We're friends from school, right? He walks with me out to the parking lot, and as we walk I learn that he had been hit by a car in high school while biking home one day. Accident required a half-dozen surgeries and had left Zed mentally impaired and a completely different person. He put my stuff in the car, shook my hand for a good 30 seconds and kept asking me to come back and see me sometime. I had hated few people in my life to that point, and no one more than him. Almost cried driving home. I felt so bad for him and disgusted with myself for my previous hatred. I ran into somebody in high school that I used to pick on regularly when we were in 1st 2nd grade. We recognized each other and I walked up to him. We exchanged a few words. Since I hadn't seen him in close to 10 years and then didn't talk again, but right before we parted ways, I apologized for the way I treated him as a child. I couldn't stress how sorry I was for being a piece of crap to him for no other reason than I felt like it. I still occasionally think about him and where he's at in life. Grown up samurai. One of mine was this kid named Patrick. One incident led to 2 of my ribs being broken when he jumped on my chest with his knees. Another resulted in a broken eye socket after being kicked in the face by him and 2 of his friends. Eventually I moved in with my father and didn't see any of my old bullies again except for a few. Some have been relatively nice and some are crapheads. During high school I filled out a bunch and took some martial arts classes, taekwondo. I was always a larger kid but too timid to fight back, but martial arts helped me overcome that. Fast forward to a year or 2 after high school and I go over to visit my mother. She had moved in with a real craphead who was into God knows what. And guess who's there? Patrick. He's now almost a foot shorter than me, skinny as a middle school girl, and was undoubtedly on M. I later found out he also did H and a myriad of other drugs. We end up talking and I tell him about how I have sinus trouble because of the beating I got from him and his friends. He laughed. I looked around at my younger brother, who had got very skinny from not eating, and sister, the environment they were in, and right then I made a decision. I turned to my mother and said, I don't give a crap if this is the kind of people you want to be around, indicating the piece of crap next to me, but we are leaving. So I piled my siblings in my car and brought them home with me. They shortly moved in with my father officially and have been much better off since. Patrick made a comment about me disrespecting him and my mother and I told him he had no respect for himself obviously, so who is he to talk like that? He went to hit me and I just stared at him. He dropped his fist quick after I stared him down for what felt like an hour. TLDR. Met middle school bully. He's a M-head. Was living with my mother. Took my siblings and left after verbally sparring with him. Feels good, man. Good for you. Way to be the bigger man. Literally and figuratively. And also save your siblings from a crappy upbringing. When I was a kid, I was fat. I used to get picked on all the time by this kid at church named Rusty. He was about 5 years older than me and every couple of weeks he would beat me up. I moved away when I was about 14. And thankfully, I didn't have to deal with him anymore. When I went to college, I decided to get my act together and get healthy. To that end, I started taking mixed martial arts. I did it for about 2 years and lost about 40 pounds. When I graduated, I moved back to where I was from and started looking for a new MMA gym. I went to the most reputable one. And who should be there but Rusty? It sounds too good to be true, but I swear to God, it happened. He hadn't changed a bit. The first thing he said to me was, finally trying to learn to defend yourself. Huh. I had called ahead and the instructor knew my deal and had arranged for me to come watch. I left my gear in the car. At the end of class, they do free rolling, jiu-jitsu sparring. Rusty comes up to me, having no knowledge that I am the least bit experienced, and starts begging the instructor to let him spar me, so he can show me the ropes. After all, he's been in MMA for 3 months now, and he never misses a UFC pay-per-view. I went outside and changed. Long story short, we sparred, and I choked him out 3 times. Afterwards, I signed up for classes. He grabbed his bag, left, and never came back. This is my favorite story out of everything that has happened in my life thus far. I'm the only person I know that got to beat up my childhood bully as an adult. Sorry if this seems sparse. I'm on mobile. Usually people with the name Rusty have it coming. I was in need for an accountant job, so I searched several websites of businesses. I came across a very worthy company, so I wanted to apply. While I was filling out the form, I looked around the website some more and saw the name of the head chief of the company. I was depressed for the rest of the day. My high school bully who bullied me every freaking day is now the freaking head chief of his own freaking bussiness. I'm an accountant. It doesn't always work out. This one is a classic. This girl used to torment me all through high school and middle school. Really went out of her way to tear me down. Whenever we had a class together, she would make her extreme dislike for me apparent, and, of course, other kids followed. I couldn't open my mouth without some kind of ridicule. Of course I was miserable, and my dad would try to cheer me up. Don't worry, kiddo. One day she'll be working at a McDonald's and serving you fries. He actually referred to her as McDonald's for years. A couple years after graduating high school I went to a Hardee's with my dad, and there was McDonald's behind the counter. So I go up to place my order and before I finish she says, "You don't remember me, do you?" "Oh, I remember you." "Oh, so, would you like fries with that?" "Why yes, yes I would." "Way to go, Dad. Called it 9 years in advance." "Oh, I remember you. Freaking class act. Love it." I had an evil 5th grade teacher who made my life terrible for a year. She even instigated a pick on Stups day. I saw her at the bar where my friend worked. The day before this we had invented a shot that tastes like urinal cake smell. Captain Morgan's Lime Bite mixed with Miller High Life. I brought my old teacher and her friends around from across the bar. I made eye contact and raised my shot of wild turkey. They gave me a curious look but took the urinal cake shot nonetheless. My old teacher proceeded to throw up on the bar and get 86 ed from one of the only bars in town. Frick you Mrs. Freeman. My sister has since become really good friends with her childhood tormentors. The sad part, to me, is that the reason she was able to patch things up was that she was a very late bloomer and ended up the kind of popular person they wanted to be friends with. I guess she kind of sold out and became friends with them. How on earth the topic never comes up amongst them, I do not know. Maybe it's her long-term plan to enact revenge, gain trust, destroy them, preferably by dumping pig's blood on their heads at a formal event of some kind. My dad is a very large man. We're talking 6 feet 7 inches 300 pounds big. He would always tell me this story to cheer me up when girls would be beating me. He was pretty chubby in high school so he played football and was good at it, but just really loved playing basketball. So his freshman year he tried out for the team and didn't make it. The coach, who was a history teacher at the school, stated his weight as an issue. Fair enough. He worked hard to lose some weight over the summer blah blah blah. Enter sophomore year, ends up having the coach as his history teacher. Great, he thinks. He can be a good student and hopefully get on the team. Wrong, this adult man decided to call my father names related to his weight and harass him in front of the class. Not cool, but my dad was too proud and never said anything. Ended up making varsity his sophomore year because of a coaching change. Fast forward about 5 years, my dad was working as a bouncer at a bar in a nearby town to where he went to school. It was a regular night when who walks in? Jackass history teacher. Perfect. He thinks I'll let it go, be professional, until he recognizes my dad as the chubby kid who was a coward. My dad looks at him and says, "Sir, I think you've had too much to drink. It's time for you to go home." The coach is saying no I'm fine etc etc. My dad grabs him by his shirt and says, "No, it's time for you to step outside. You have had too much to drink." The coach decides to swing at my dad and that's when he loses it. He states this is for all the kids you've called fat you piece of crap and proceeds to beat the tar out of him. A long story I know, but my favorite by far. My dad and his old bouncer friends always tell it when they got together too. A revenge. Just a generic high school reunion story. The 2-3 most athletic kids had gained weight and gotten some chick pregnant. I think one was still with the mother, who had gained even more weight, and one paid child support. The hot girl that every guy wanted to bang had gotten married and had 3 kids, was still smoking hot, but had gotten super religious to the point that it was creepy. Haven't gone to any high school reunions. I actually didn't have that many enemies in high school, but middle school, oh man. Facebook is such a great boost for that. A bunch of the popular middle school girls who were awful to me got really fat. Some of them had oops babies and are constantly having baby daddy drama. HA. I've got 2. I was picked on a lot. About 10 years ago I got a temporary job at Kroger. It was just stocking shelves. And I had another restaurant job lined up but needed something for about 2 months while I went through a lengthy hiring process there. Spoiler, I wound up getting an even better job elsewhere and wound up never taking that. So I go to get my check on my first payday at Kroger and find out the manager at the front is one of the guys who used to bully the crap out of me in high school. He made small talk for a minute. "Hey, how you been? Good to see you," he clearly remembered. Once everyone walked away he leaned in and said, "Hey, deprecated 0. I'm really sorry for all the crap I did to you in school. I was a stupid butthole kid. I smiled, held out my hand, thanked him and told him it's all in the past. That was really cool. The other is less cool, but hilarious to me. This girl was the prom queen basically, the stereotypical mean girl dating the football player. My opinion of her was always that she was just spoiled, worthless, and dumb. I don't usually take joy in other people's misfortune, but I felt schadenfreude in unparalleled amounts the day I walked into Buffalo Wild Wings and saw her standing behind the counter. This is maybe 10 years out of high school. She looks exactly the same. Put on some weight, maybe, but hair still done the same. Still looks like she got Effie Trinket to do her makeup. So on. You can tell at a glance that she's never mentally moved past 8th grade. I asked how she been. Tried to politely talk to her because hey, I want people to do well. She was a B. Was like you're deprecated 0. I just raised my eyebrows at her and let it go. Long story short, her boss was my roommate. I asked him about her. Single mother. Just got kicked out of her mom's house. He just hired her like 2 weeks earlier. He confronted her about talking down to customers and wound up firing her. Felt like justice. It's always nice to see a bully honestly own up to mistakes and apologize. I lucked out and didn't really garner any enemies while in middle school and high school, mostly because I was the poor kid at a snobby private school in Nashville, TN until I moved in 9th grade and nobody would talk to me. Haha. There was this one really obnoxious boy in one of my classes in 7th grade though. Treated everyone like handmaids, but the parents had money so nothing was ever really done about it. Ran across his Facebook page the other day. His parents just bought him his second Lamborghini because he wrecked the first one. I try not to hold animosity towards anyone, but I hope somebody keys that car. I wouldn't worry about it, mate. He'll probably frick up the second car as well. I was working in a video rental store in Houston, circa 1989. About 2 years after I graduated high school. In comes a girl that had always been awful to me from 10th grade to graduation. She would cross a room just to say something mean, and I had no history with this girl at all. I had never actually said a word to her. All our exchanges were just her saying something mean to me. I didn't even know her last name. I must have reminded her of someone. She comes into the store and sheepishly said that she wanted 3 dirty movies. She didn't seem to remember me. She said her best friend was getting married and she wanted some dirty movies for the bachelorette party. The shop had a small adult room that you had to access by coming behind the counter, but she didn't want to go in there. She asked me to select 3 films. She was squirming with embarrassment as I tried to find out what she was into and kind of acted like I thought the films were for her and her alone. She said, just grab 3 good ones. I don't care. So I selected 3 all lesbian PS and she slunk out with them. I would have loved to see the look on their faces when they popped those tapes in. She returned them through the night drop so she wouldn't have to look anyone in the eye when she brought them back. She rented on her parents' account. I sent a notice through the mail to her parents that Mona's 3-way sea party had been returned damaged and they owed us $30. And that night, her dad had to sleep on the couch and never knew why. In grade 10, my locker was next to that of one of the most popular guys in school. I was not so popular. When both at our lockers, he would regularly whisper close to my face that I was a stupid S and that he was going to rape me. Fast forward 4 years at a party, he shows up. Out of morbid curiosity, I speak to him. He started hitting on me, obviously not recognizing who I was. I laughed and said loud enough for everyone around us to hear, I'm not going to frick you, especially after you threatened to rape me almost every day of grade 10. He was horrified. I smiled and walked away. This is one of my favorites in this thread so far. Met a kid that was an absolute brute in high school. Thought he was tough crap. I think I only went face to face with him once over some dumb crap about him threatening a friend of mine. No real fight ever came from it, but he was definitely an enemy. Met him randomly in an airport halfway across the country maybe 4 years after high school. He was the nicest guy. The Marines beat the stupid right out of him. I was playing poker in Atlantic City about 7 years ago and one of the guys that bullied me, Chad, sat at my table. There's no way he recognized me. I was actually playing on a no limit hold'em table while waiting for a seat to open in a 2-way high-low game. Anyway, I stayed at the NLHE table just to take his money. I played probably 95% of the pot he was in. He was pretty drunk and wasn't very good. I got close to $600 off of him in a little over an hour before he decided to quit. I have no idea what he does for a living, but I am 100% sure he is a big loser when he plays cards. Frickin' Chad. He was destined to be a douchebag from the name his parents gave him. Bullied me in middle school. Now in college and creates those modern artsy clothing for a celebrity or two. Hey, I guess I'm happy for him. He worked hard for it. Well, this one bummed me out a bit. You got bullied by Mugatu. Ours was extremely smart and very athletic. He was an incredible wrestler and undefeated throughout high school. I saw him at a party at a friend's house randomly and we caught eyes a few times and eventually we just approached each other and said hello, exchanged bro hugs. Mind you, we hardly talked. The only time we really did was when I told him to stop picking on someone and told me he would kick my butt instead. He was a lovely guy. Anyway, he hadn't changed one bit. He tried to pick fights with people throughout the night and kept looking at me while he was in yelling matches with people. So I kept getting in between him and the other person, telling them both to calm down. This happened a few times until it started getting a little physical and he looked at me again. So I stood up and he tried to push the guy one more time. So I grabbed him by his shoulders and started pushing him back, telling him to cool it, and I thought, what the frick am I doing? He is an angry wrestler that can take me down. Once I got him back a ways and told him to knock it off, he just looked at me and said, you know what I could do to that guy, but I don't want to. Please, stop me. It was the saddest hold me back bro moment I have ever been a part of. It was odd that he kept looking for me to stop his fights, but I was glad I was that guy for a bit. That's really sad. Guy needs counseling. I had a teacher in grade 12 for modern Western history. The class was incredibly boring as a result of her teaching style and I didn't pay much attention during the year. I was sporting a solid D in the class and Mrs. Censored would make reference to me being a dullard continuously. On many occasions over the year people would laugh at me as a result of a comment she made. At the time I didn't think she was trying to be vindictive, just trying to jeer me into doing better in the class. Nonetheless, I'm sure it did have some impact on my self-esteem. Fast forward 8 years, I am running a college pro painting franchise. Standing in a customer's driveway getting supplies out of the back of my wicked awesome Chevy Lumina minivan. Mrs. Censored walks by, recognizes me and says, oh, I'm so glad you got a job. You know, I could have told you were going to go into a manual labor trade. You were never really focused in as flat a tone as I could. I got to tell her that not only am I running this franchise that employ 12 people that summer, but that I'm doing it while still a full-time student getting my BCom. The best satisfaction I have ever had, because it didn't have to be confrontational, but I got to set her straight. Fast forward another 7 years and I am running an internet advertising business. Her son applies for the job. He was underqualified, but during the interview we started talking about his mom. Not in a bad way. Turns out she is way harder on him than she ever was to me. Constantly berating him because he wasn't very studious and dropped out of university. I gave him the job and he is now our best employee. I see Mrs. Censored from time to time. Never spoken about how she made my life heck my last year of high school, but I now have the satisfaction of defying expectations of me and her son while being his biggest benefactor. There are so many people who take out their frustrations toward their bullies against the next generation. Thanks for being someone who saves the kids instead of uses them as weapons against their parents. I had a grade 11 history teacher who picked on me, insulted me in front of the class and gave me crappy grades. He told me he would never send his own children to public school with such morons. Fast forward 5 years or so, I'm almost finished my first degree and have made all A's in university so far. Crappy teacher comes into the physiotherapy clinic I'm working at. My co-worker deals with him and I tell her the story. When he comes back to book his next up, my co-worker started talking about me as if she didn't know he had been my teacher. Bragged about how she loved mentoring students who are doing so well in school and how successful I had been at work so far. He never returned for his second apt. My math teacher in grade 11 told me to never take math again. It is not my thing. If I take math in grade 12 I will fail. He was right. I go into my mechanic to change my brakes. The usual milfy cashier offers me coffee. I make small talk, been going there forever. They are an honest car repair shop. believe it or not. Then I notice the guy hunched over a Honda. I call out. He turns, squints his eyes, goes, "Hi Ugafin." I call him out on his behavior. He tells me he's straightened up after mouthing off to the wrong person nearly cost him his life. He showed me a shank wound 3 centimeters under his heart. He's apparently happily finishing a course in auto repair and had just been hired at the garage. He turns out to be a nice guy, having sorted out his issues. I routinely bring him donuts when I bring the car in and he gets me rebates because dude, I brought donuts. Came late to the game so nobody will probably see it, but here it goes anyway. There was a freakishly large guy who walked the same way home as me in high school and used to mercilessly push me and say degrading things. My older brother was a monster and would stop him if he was ever there, but that rarely happened. Fast forward 4 years after graduation. I am a successful casino supervisor and he is working at Big 5 in the sporting goods department. I of course held no hard feelings, understanding he had a crappy life and he was just acting out bad stuff and feelings that he had from growing up. Apparently he did not feel the same way and advised a man as he handed him a rifle it was not okay to point it at anybody in the store, except for me. He doubled down and told him the rifle was 10% off if the rifle was pointed at me. I looked at him and asked him if he understood what he was doing. He just smiled threateningly at me. At this point I was besides myself and couldn't believe he would make such a massive and illegal mistake. I went to the front and called the manager. I explained the situation and told him that I was calling the police immediately and contacting a lawyer unless said employee was fired on the spot and escorted from the store. When the manager looked into it, the guy wasn't even smart enough to lie. He just said it had been a joke and I was being a bee. The customer backed me up too. I told him we could avoid lawsuits and cops. Just fire him and I would drop it. I got to watch with immense satisfaction as they escorted him from the premises about 20 minutes after the manager agreed and the look of glee on my face just pushed his anger further. I had been willing to drop it, but that win was one of the best feelings of my whole life. TLDR. Got a dude who bullied me in high school fired on the spot from his job and removed from the store for asking a customer to point a gun at me. I ran into a high school classmate a while back. I've posted this before but it bears repeating. A guy in high school just didn't like me and I him. We got into a big dang fight. He broke my nose and I knocked a couple of his teeth out. Off campus. No police were involved but about 10 years later I saw him sleeping on the street near where I worked. I woke him up and asked him what was going on. He told me about his life after high school. He knocked up his girlfriend. Her parents made them get married, divorce a year later. He got into drugs and ended up alienating everyone. I asked him if he was still using and he said no. He couldn't buy a dose anyway. I felt bad for him so I asked if he'd like to stay in my guest house, a 1-room cottage, set up like an efficiency apartment, for a while. He took me up on it and got a night's sleep in an actual bed for the first time in years, his words. I bought him some clothes and fed him for about a month until I found him a job with a contractor I was doing some work for. Long story short, it's been 6 years. He now owns a contracting business, has a wife and a new baby boy, and just bought the house down the street from me. Good for you, man. Being the bigger person is much better than stewing in bitter immature revenge. Probably doomed as this thread is large, but I had an experience with an old grade school bully that made me very happy. Was sitting at my house playing video games one day, about a year out of high school when I heard a knock at my front door. I open it to see, I'll call him Jim, standing on my front porch. He said hello and then immediately just launched into a lengthy apology. He felt horrible for mistreating me and many other nerdy kids back in school. We were in classes together from about 3rd grade through junior year. I was one of the people he had decided to personally track down and speak with. Turns out, he had made some bad mistakes after graduating and spent about 9 months in prison. It was a wake-up call for him. He was sober and really trying to get his life in order. He gave me his phone number and said that I ever felt like getting together, I should give him a call. I called him later that week on a whim and we ended up becoming good friends for the next 3 years. Unfortunately, he began to slip. I walked into his house as he was doing in the living room. I hung out a handful of times after that, but saw him doing worse and worse. M was one of the triggers for the violent behavior that got Jim into prison initially. I did not want to see a repeat, so I quietly took my leave. I haven't spoken with him since. I hope he's doing well. Good guy, at heart. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.